Joining me now in studio is David Holt. He's mayor of Oklahoma City. As mayor, his One OKC message seeks to promote a common purpose in a divided country. In addition, he's focused on making Oklahoma City an engine of economic growth in the region and one that is welcoming to entrepreneurs. Mayor Holt, it's great to see you live in person in the studio
isn't
there.
This wonderful?
Like I've been talking to you online now for a couple of years. Look, I think it's really intriguing that this annual meeting of the U.S. Mayors Conference in Washington is kind of a reminder and a wake-up call about what you could do in cities that you can't do at the federal government. That there's a lot of innovation and things going on. And what I've been asking every mayor I've been talking to is, as they look at the challenge right now in what looks to us from here at the top perch, a kind of toxic country, not talking to each other, people living in bubbles, a lot of people talking past each other. I'm just interested in the role you think mayors can play in healing this country, healing their own towns and cities, but healing this country.
Yeah, well, wow, great question, profound and timely question, but I have an answer. I mean, mayors get things done because we have to. That's the first reason. I mean, it seems as if it's a luxury at the federal and state level to play politics as entertainment, to kind of pat yourselves on the back for an awesome tweet or a great press conference and not actually get anything done. That somehow, people on the ground don't depend as much on the federal and state levels. But at the city level, listen, if you're a human being in a city, you're going to use a city service 25 times a day. I mean, we can't afford to not take this seriously, and we can't afford to not work together to have outputs that our residents expect. So that's the first reason that mayors are generally successful, because we have no other choice. The city wouldn't function, our lives wouldn't move forward. The second reason is many of us, not all, but many of us are elected in nonpartisan elections, and we wouldn't even have enough time today, but to me, the evils of American politics all stem from the reality that most people in public service positions are elected through closed partisan primaries where they have to, appeal to a small subset of the electorate. They do not get to face the whole electorate, and in turn, the whole electorate does not get to choose from all of the candidates. They're often deprived of some of the best candidates that never get to come to the general election. But in a mayor's race, in most cities, we may be known to be Republicans or Democrats. It's not that. It's that we get to face the whole electorate, and they get to choose from all of the candidates. And so somebody like me, you mentioned One OKC in your introduction to me. That's a mantra I have lived as mayor, because in running for and in serving, I get to build a coalition of regular people from across the ideological spectrum, Republicans and Democrats. And I get to count on their votes as well. I know that when I run for re-election, I'll have the opportunity to get Democratic votes. I don't just have to go through a closed partisan primary. And I find that 70 to 80% of people, despite all this rhetoric about a divided country, actually just want to work together and get things done. And this extremism really just comes from the 15% at both ends that tends to have an outsized voice in closed primaries, but are largely rendered irrelevant in a nonpartisan election. And that's why you get mayors who are really statespeople. And why so often people think, gosh, I wish my president, I wish my vice president, I wish my Speaker of the House, I wish my Senate leader was a mayor. At least that's how mayors think anyways. Yeah. But the reason they often admire mayors is for all of that we get things done, and we have to, and we get to get people together on the same page. I would have no other option for success in Oklahoma City if I didn't do that, because we're a very purple city. We have to work together. But this is a purple country all in all. And I hope that somehow mayors can lead by example and continue to provide a path forward for our country towards that type of healing that you just referenced.
Mayor Holt, let me ask you another kind of complicated question. I'm not even sure I'm going to get this right, folks, but my family's from Oklahoma, about 3 hours north of Oklahoma City in Bartlesville, which is near Tulsa. And I am aware of some of the divides and divisions in Oklahoma, more in the Tulsa area than Oklahoma City. But I know that in our past we did have redlining of districts. We did have divides. We had transportation decisions that benefited some parts of towns, and really created big costs and hurdles for other parts of town. And I look at the infrastructure bill, and I've asked this of a lot of mayors and governors around the country, is this not an opportunity to push reset and maybe use these dollars to come in to kind of tie these communities back together when in fact those dollars were used to divide them in the past? Is that part of your thinking when you see money come into Oklahoma City on the infrastructure bill? Is that a priority, or have you already kind of moved forward on that in ways that our audience should know?
Well, I'm very familiar with what you're talking about, and we certainly have an interstate in Oklahoma City that cut right through at the time, the historic heart of the African American community. Unfortunately, sometimes so much time has passed that those communities don't exist anymore. I mean, they're not there anymore to be connected. They left that area because it was destroyed by the highway. So. And largely, I find that's the case in Oklahoma City. I'm well aware that in the infrastructure bill there is a focus on that, and I think that's great. It's not a lot of money, really. It's about I believe it's $1 billion. I don't know if you know road construction costs in America, but
no, but you're the first one. Everybody says, yeah, we're in D.C., we're getting a lot of money. You're the first to actually say, I've been wanting to ask it, is it a lot? You need more.
I mean, $1 billion for a country to reconnect all of its neighborhoods that were broken by interstates is that might do one city. But by doing it at all, you are at least starting that conversation. Because how many people have been talking about the division of communities by interstates? Very, very little, unless you're like a student of interstate history or you read books about New York City. I mean, like it's not something that's been on the radar. So I'm glad that the infrastructure bill puts it on the radar. There's a need for a lot more resources beyond that to make it happen. In Oklahoma City, I'm definitely open to that conversation. But the truth is today, especially in a city as sprawled as Oklahoma City, transit is probably a better answer for connectivity than covering over highways.
How is the transit picture in Oklahoma City, the public transit? How much does it cost? How much do you have to build? Do you have the resources you need?
So we're 620 square miles. We've given ourselves an extraordinary challenge. We are the same size. You could put Chicago, Boston, Manhattan, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and Miami inside the city limits of Oklahoma City at the same time.
Wow. Will you say that again? Say that again.
Oh, don't make me rattle them all off again. No,
right.
Chicago, Boston, Miami, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and Manhattan. And I could usually pick about
folks,
6
I want to just, that is a tweetable moment if you can get all that. Okay, go ahead. That's profound.
But we only have 680,000 taxpayers. I mean, we're the 22nd largest city. I don't mean to say only. We're very proud of that. But at the same time, I just rattled off 6 cities that have a combined population, or more importantly, a combined taxpayer base of millions of people. So public transit has been a struggle for us for that reason. We're built around the automobile. We're very spread out. There are some bonuses to living life that way, but public transit is not one of them. So it's something that we as a community over the last 10 or 15 years have focused back on and tried to provide a higher level of service. And there's definitely a lot of big conversations happening in Oklahoma City about public transit. And we're optimistic at the prospect of getting a bit of a jolt through the infrastructure bill.
Well, on the other side of infrastructure, the modern highway is broadband. Mm-hmm. How are you on broadband connectivity in the greater Oklahoma region?
Yeah, we have historically been completely dependent on the private sector for that, and so you have, I won't give them free advertising, but lots of great partners in our city that work in the private sector in that area. I want our people in Oklahoma City, though, to chase everything there is in this infrastructure bill, and most of it's going to be kind of grant-based and application-based. And so I'm well aware of the broadband component, and if there's a need that we can try to fill in Oklahoma City, I absolutely want to chase it. But to this point, in our community at least, that hasn't been a focus of the public sector. But I'm well aware that we have that opportunity with the infrastructure bill, maybe to fill some gaps.
Look, one of the things you and I have discussed before, and it's one of my little obsessions, are these small firms, micro ventures, you can call them ventures or micro businesses, that really have not, maybe until recently, begun to kind of even register on the dashboard of things like the Small Business Administration or the money and resources that were doled out during the pandemic. And a company called GoDaddy basically commissioned a study working with the University of Iowa, Arizona State, I think UCLA Anderson School, looking at the development. They're an internet registrar, right? So they can kind of, look at when they're looking at the hotlines of people plugging in, of this growth of these micro businesses across America, and then looking at how those communities during a recession or during times end up being the ones that bounce back faster or resilient. Or if you look like the way people are trying to develop side hustles, and the diversity among them is astounding. And I know that you've been looking at this and also looking at specifically in Oklahoma City. So I'd love to kind of get a take from you about how you're looking at these micro ventures and how you're communicating about them to some of your mayoral colleagues.
Yeah, well, first of all, for people who followed political discourse as long as you and I have, you know that a few decades ago, small businesses really entered the lexicon in a big way, and everybody from mayor to president learned how to talk about small businesses, and we still do. But I think what GoDaddy's identifying here, and other obviously people in this discourse, is okay, maybe there's need for one more stratification. Like small businesses is a pretty broad spectrum. Everything below Exxon is a small business, right? So what about these businesses with 10 or fewer employees? I mean, they're small businesses, but boy, their challenges are very different than a business with 60 employees, right? So maybe we need to kind of talk about micro businesses in a unique way. And so essentially, most small businesses started as micro businesses. I assume very few people hire 20 people on the first day. It was one guy, one family, and they grow from there. So most of your economy is going to be micro businesses, and all of your future economy is going to start as a micro business. The big companies that are great in Oklahoma City, we always like to point out, started as small businesses, but really we need to point out they started as micro businesses. They started with 1 or 2 employees. So that's a big driver of your economy, and if you want to have a city where those types of businesses are accommodated and grow and stay, you need to kind of think about how are we working with them? Are we providing the regulatory environment? Are we providing the cultural and quality of life environment? Are we providing an inclusive environment? Are we providing access to capital? How many cities bemoan the loss of tomorrow's Google because the 2-employee firm had to move to Silicon Valley to get access to capital, And so we want to be on top of all those things. And I think it's a fresh look in the last few years, but I definitely see that our economic development team in Oklahoma City is more focused on that than ever before. We've got a lot of different programs, and we're also being very intentional about equity and making sure that we're especially cognizant of minority-owned micro businesses and so on.
And do you find the uptake, because I know you have a significant Black population, you have a significant Native American population, Are you finding them embracing the resources you're putting forward?
Well, sometimes, but sometimes you really have to go out. I mean, you can't, what we have learned in so many issues of equity is you cannot just put it on the website, and expect people to know that that's where to look. I mean, you really have to be intentional about bringing these opportunities to people. They have great ideas, but they may not have had the exposure to bureaucracy and incentives that other people have had, and there's nothing wrong with that. We've got to go out though and be proactive. And that's not just a business thing. I mean, it's about government too. It's about representation. I mean, you just can't kind of sit back and say, well, the doors were unlocked, they could have come in. I mean, you have to go take people by the hand and really show them the opportunities that exist.
Well, look, I want to tell our audience, because I wrote an article about this, I just have it memorized. You can actually learn more about it. I'm not promoting this for them, but I think it's really interesting. And I just love the fact that there's a major American mayor sitting here with me talking about the development on kind of the business scene that a lot of people in D.C. are just not even aware of. They don't even know how to begin thinking about the environment.
I suspect this word microbusiness is going to be integral to the political lexicon in 5 years.
That's great. Well, I think because of what you're doing. So it's called the Venture Forward Study. I think it's at ventureforward.com. Don't hold me to that, but you can look it up there. But David Holt, Mayor of Oklahoma City, really appreciate your time. I could spend hours talking to you, I know, and I hope you'll come back many more times. But thank you very much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for the time.